So this all started about 7 months ago in Toronto, where it started with two of us getting really angry, and it wasn't the first time we'd been angry, but we'd really had enough of being angry, and we wanted to do something with that anger. When we heard a Toronto police officer say on a York University campus when talking about safety that I've been told I shouldn't say this, but women should stop dressing like sluts to avoid being victimized.
Boo!
We had just about enough, and we wanted to say something about it. Apologizing for a statement like that is not enough, because there are too many people that will not come forward when they hear things like that. So we wanted to get into action, and we wanted to throw that word he threw at us right back at him and right back at the Toronto Police Force.
Yeah!
We wanted people to talk about it in our city. We were angry, and we had no idea so many other people would feel the same way and would really have had enough. Since our walk in April, there have been hundreds of walks over I think over 150 cities around the world, in 6 continents, in different languages, combating their own cities and people within them, and gathering amazing support like you all have done today. We wanted to talk about things that we felt like weren't getting enough attention. We wanted to talk about victim blaming. The statements that you hear so often, the she's asking for it, well, what do you expect from a girl like her? Well, did you hear what he did last weekend? These are not okay. We wanted to talk about slut shaming or slut bashing or sex shaming, where somehow people come up with ideas about who deserves respect or how much someone is worth based on how they look, what they think of them, what idea they have about their sexuality in their head, and we wanted to talk about that. So what is a slut or a whore or words like this? The problem is they don't have a uniform definition. People might be able to say, oh, well, I know the definition of that, it's in the dictionary. Well, when you look at the people who get called these words, it doesn't have a uniform definition. Anybody can be sexually assaulted, and that is the terrifying and heartbreaking thing. It can be across genders. Women and girls, most often that we know, face sexual violence. But men and boys do as well, and all gender expressions do, which includes trans people and intersex people. All races experience sexual violence. All abilities experience sexual violence, including people with disabilities. All people from different immigration statuses, including people with no immigration status, who frequently have nowhere to go and no one to turn to be able to talk about these issues and get support. Every type of profession, which includes sex workers, who also need support and who never deserve or ask to be assaulted. Every socioeconomic level, it doesn't matter how much you make, every orientation, every experience and background, every level of education across this campus and across your city and across our city. And these are tough and complex conversations, and they need to be, because we need to talk about these things. If you've never talked about all of these different aspects to sexual violence, start talking about them, ask questions. This learning curve never ends. Things that have kept us going are continuously acknowledging things that have come before us and inspired us, like women's centers, like violence against women campaigns, like support services for every survivor, from men to women to trans people. And these are supports that continue to go on around us, and we can't forget that. SlutWalk is only one way. It is not the only way, and it will never be the only way. We need to focus on education that is based in respect and consent, and not making assumptions, and not being entitled to people's identity or people's bodies. And it's not just about hearing a no, it's about getting a yes. That does not happen enough. I say yes when I want to say yes, and it is damn good. As I said, these are complex conversations. We can say victim blaming needs to end, and that is a very clear statement. What does that mean, and how do we make that happen? And how do we make that happen for everybody? These are difficult and complex conversations. Thanks, Heather. So in my work and the conversations that I've been a part of and things that I've just generally heard out in the world about sexual assault, one thing that keeps coming up for me is conversations about safety and how we can make these happen in a non-damaging way. As Heather was just telling us, SlutWalk began because of a police officer's inappropriate and offensive comment during a talk being given to students about safety tips. These were safety tips related to universally applicable things like fire safety, household safety, personal safety, until he let slip that women should avoid dressing like sluts if they don't want to be raped. Everybody wants to be safe, and everybody wants the people they care about to be safe. Tips like these are given with the best of intentions. Unfortunately, they come with consequences. When it comes to taking precautions against sexual violence, it's important to look at two things. The first is how safety tips are contextualized and how these conversations are framed. What we should be hearing, but don't often hear, is something that sounds more like, please consider doing A, B, and C to whatever degree that you can at any point in time. These actions may lower your risk. However, living your life involves risk. You should never feel as though you have to live your life prohibitively for fear of sexual violence. And should anything ever happen to you, no matter what precautions you did or did not take, it is never your fault. The fact is, someone can do everything right and still be sexually assaulted. It is never acceptable for victims to be audited for a judgment on the degree of prevention they exercised. This is where safety tips and the wrong kinds of safety tips not framed properly court victim blaming. The other piece is not only how these are delivered, but where these safety tips come from. Are they standard personal safety precautions that can apply to absolutely anybody, regardless of age, gender, race, or sexual orientation? Or are they culturally informed judgments that infer what we think we know about sexual violence, but are actually rooted in sexual politics? If we take the sexual out of sexual assault, it becomes easier to make these distinctions. Try to be aware of your surroundings. Make an effort to surround yourself with trustworthy people. Do your best to enjoy substances responsibly. These are a few precautions to which there is merit. However, when we start to look at the other stuff that we generally hear tacked on to these types of tips as though it naturally belongs, things like, be aware of how other people may perceive your actions as provocative. Don't flirt with someone you're not planning to have sex with. Don't start something you don't intend to finish. And the now infamous, don't dress like a slut. This is where precaution talk gets dicey. These types of safety tips are informed by the gender and sexual politics we still struggle with as a society that teach us that women who do not behave as they should are likely to run into consequences. It is a mistake, and one that continually endangers women by perpetuating rape culture, to make the jump from actions that may be considered sexually provocative to those same actions as capable of inciting rape. When consent is not a part of the equation, it stops being about sex and starts being about violence and power. SlutWalk has been criticized for being anti-safety or for supposedly advocating for people to be reckless and discard any notion of responsibility for their personal safety. In actuality, part of what SlutWalk is seeking to do is to clarify the differences between what actually can contribute to safety and which statements are red herrings beholden to cultural myths, misunderstandings about the genesis of sexual violence, and gender roles. My use of the word precaution instead of prevention is also intentional. Let's be clear that sexual assault is not like when you want to prevent getting wet in the rain, you bring an umbrella outside. While varying degrees of precaution may be able to lower risk, there is absolutely nothing anybody can do to definitively prevent themselves from being assaulted. Why? Because the act of sexual assault is not their choice, does not derive from their actions, and nobody is responsible for the actions of another human being, no matter what they said, no matter what they did, and no matter what they wore. This is why I joined SlutWalk.
Yeah!
Too many people are survivors, and I hate saying that all the time. Too many people are survivors. But it is things like this that let people know that they are cared for, and people are listening, and people are there. Probably too many people in this crowd are survivors, and we also have to remember the people who aren't in this crowd, the people who haven't broken through silence, who do not have the safety to say no, or to get out into the streets or on campuses to do things like this, or the people who don't feel supported. And we need to keep making strides to get that to be in a better position. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for continuing to do this on your campus, SlutWalk or otherwise. It's not about today or yesterday, it's about keeping going every day. Thank you so much.